Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are unpacking a fascinating and incredibly complex 90-year geopolitical journey. In this explainer, we're going to impartially trace the events that shaped the modern subcontinent, strictly following the timeline of India and Pakistan from 1857 all the way to 1947.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We are tackling a massive historical question today. How did a completely united front of Hindus and Muslims in 1857 eventually fracture into two entirely separate nations? We're going to trace this exact cause and effect journey to see how one single historical event inevitably triggered the next.
To understand all of this, we'll follow a clear timeline. We'll start with the 1857 Uprising and its aftermath, move through the educational and linguistic divides, the early political awakening, pacts and movements, the constitutional crisis, and finally, the road to partition.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the 1857 Uprising and Aftermath.
So back in 1857, Hindus and Muslims actually fought a joint war of resistance against the expanding rule of the British East India Company. And why did they rebel? Well, consider this staggering imbalance. 80% of the administration was totally controlled by the British, leaving just 20% for the millions of local Indians. When you combine that massive administrative imbalance with heavy taxation on local farmers, plus an economy built on exporting cheap raw materials only to import expensive finished goods, you literally have the absolute perfect recipe for a revolt.
Moving right along to Section 2, Educational and Linguistic Divides.
The 1857 revolt ultimately failed, and with the British taking direct control afterward, Muslims faced heavy blame and severe restrictions. This sparked a really deep internal fracture within the community on how to actually survive. On one side, you had Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's Aligarh movement, culminating in a college in 1875. They strongly believed the key to survival was promoting Western and English education to bridge the gap and align with the British. But then, reacting directly against this westernization was the Darul Uloom Deoband, founded in 1866. They focused strictly on traditional Islamic education to preserve their religious identity. These early, wildly differing strategies fundamentally shaped the community's future.
Just a year after Deoband was founded, another huge rift opened up: the Urdu-Hindi controversy of 1867. This was a political movement demanding that Sanskrit and Hindi replace Urdu as the official government language. This linguistic dispute was a massive turning point. It actually led figures like Sir Syed to theorize, very early on, that Hindus and Muslims might simply be too distinct to peacefully coexist in a shared political landscape.
Which brings us to Section 3, Early Political Awakening.
Fast forward to the late 19th century, and the focus shifts heavily toward organized political demands. It started with the creation of the Indian National Congress in 1885, which was initially meant to be a single platform for all Indians, but things escalate really rapidly from there. In 1905, the British partitioned the massive province of Bengal for administrative reasons. This inadvertently creates a Muslim-majority province, which pleased Muslims but deeply angered Hindus and the Congress, who launched massive protests. Feeling completely alienated by that reaction, a delegation of Muslims met the British Viceroy in 1906. This is known as the Simla Deputation. Shortly after, they formed their own political party, the All India Muslim League, and their political lobbying actually worked. By 1909, the Minto-Morley reforms officially granted Muslims the right to separate electorates, meaning Muslim voters would specifically elect Muslim representatives.
Next up is Section 4, Pacts, Reforms, and Movements.
So the outbreak of World War I completely shifts the geopolitical dynamics in the region. It essentially forced a brief yet highly significant period of cooperation as everyone tried to navigate wartime pressures. A crucial breakthrough happened with the Lucknow Pact of 1916. Muhammad Ali Jinnah played an absolutely instrumental role here in uniting both the Congress and the Muslim League to agree on a joint set of demands. The crucial point is, they agreed on one-third Muslim representation in the Central Council, officially recognized separate electorates, and established the demand for provincial autonomy. For a moment, unified political progress seemed entirely possible. And this cooperation really hit its peak during the massive Khilafat movement from 1919 to 1924. Post-World War I, Indian Muslims launched this movement to protect the Ottoman Empire, and it actually united with Mahatma Gandhi's non-cooperation movement against the British. Millions of people boycotted British goods and jobs. It was huge. However, this immense movement ultimately collapsed. The violent Chowri Chowra incident in 1922 caused Gandhi to pull his support, and then by 1924, a modernized Turkey abolished the caliphate altogether. This unique era of unity came to an incredibly abrupt end.
Now we enter Section 5, the constitutional crisis.
By the late 1920s, the British essentially challenged Indians to draft their own constitution, and while those deep ideological divisions aggressively resurfaced, in 1928, the Nehru Report was published as a proposed Indian constitution, but it completely ignored specific Muslim rights and demands for provincial autonomy. Now, what's really interesting here is that Jinnah's famous 14 points in 1929 were a direct, point-by-point reaction to this, strongly demanding robust provincial autonomy and one-third representation at the center. This stark deadlock firmly gripped the entire subcontinent.
With that intense political deadlock setting in, new ideas really began to form. During his 1930 Allahabad address, poet and philosopher Allama Iqbal articulated a major historical milestone. According to the sources, this was the very first time the dream of a separate, independent Muslim state in the Northwest was so clearly and publicly voiced. The ideological seeds of partition were now officially planted.
Finally, Section 6, the road to partition.
Constitutional failures combined with the extreme global pressures of World War II rapidly accelerated political demands away from shared governance and toward absolute division. The real turning point? The 1937 provincial elections. The Congress Party won a massive, sweeping victory, and this led to roughly 2.5 years of rule that Muslims felt was highly oppressive and culturally marginalizing. This intense period of alienation fundamentally changed the political trajectory of the Muslim League.
Because of the heavy fallout from those 1937 elections, the Muslim League officially shifted its ultimate goal. They were no longer just seeking political rights within a united India. On March 23, 1940, they passed the Lahore Resolution. This was a game changer. It was the first official, formal political demand for entirely independent states in the Muslim-majority areas of the Northwest and the East.
At this exact same time, World War II is absolutely raging, and the British desperately needed Indian support. But Indian politics were effectively paralyzed. The British offered post-war independence via the 1942 Cripps mission, but both major Indian parties flat out rejected it. In response, Gandhi launches the Quit India movement, demanding immediate British withdrawal, which the British answer with the widespread arrest of political leaders, completely stalling out any chance for progress.
Which brings us to a really profound final thought to consider today. In 1944, when Gandhi was released from prison, he and Jinnah held their famous talks, fundamentally debating the concept of identity itself. Gandhi argued that a change in religion doesn't change someone's core nationality, while Jinnah argued that Indian Muslims constituted an entirely distinct nation. If these differing philosophies on national identity were truly irreconcilable by 1944, was partition truly inevitable? I'll leave you to ponder that based on the history we've unpacked today. Thanks so much for joining this explainer.